Hi, my name is Sarah Rockwell, and I'm a research biologist at Klamath Bird Observatory. Thank you for coming to listen today to my talk on our project about tracking migration routes and overwintering locations of the western purple martin that I'm working on with Deanna Williams at the Forest Service, Joan Hagar at USGS, and Joe Metzler, one of our amazing volunteers. If you're not familiar with us, KBO is a nonprofit based in Southern Oregon, emphasizing high caliber science and the role of birds as indicator species. KBO works to advance bird and habitat conservation. We use a collaborative conservation planning approach fueled by long-term monitoring, theoretical research, and applied ecology that addresses natural resource management challenges. We focus on our home Klamath-Siskiyou bioregion of Northern California and Southern Oregon, and we also work regionally through the Avian Knowledge Northwest, our interactive online data center. And we also work with international partners to protect our shared migratory birds throughout their annual cycles. Today, I want to talk to you about the work we're doing in collaboration with the Forest Service and USGS on the western purple martin. So the unique western subspecies of purple martin is roughly estimated at just 3,500 pairs and is considered to be of conservation concern by our regional Forest Service and BLM offices. The states of Oregon, Washington, and California consider it to be a species of special concern, and it's also on the blue list in the province of British Columbia. This is because they've undergone pretty severe range-wide declines thought to be due to habitat loss, nest site competition, possibly an effect of the widespread use of pesticides in our modern agricultural world. And they're now experiencing a relatively short and recent period of some population recovery, in part due to some nest box management projects. They're at risk because of their small breeding population size, the decline in their numbers, and restriction of their breeding range, and the ongoing loss of nesting habitat. So here's a range map of all three purple martin subspecies, which you may be familiar with. The western one, Progne subis arboricola, is pictured in green here. The western subspecies more often nests in natural snags than its eastern counterpart, so the average colony size here tends to be a little smaller. And on this map, the red star on the Oregon coast shows the location of our study site. In 2019, I was asked to write a conservation assessment for this subspecies for the ISSSSP, which is an interagency program between the Forest Service and the BLM in the states of Oregon and Washington. And this assessment identified a lot of gaps in our knowledge of the basic life history of western purple martin subspecies. So most of our knowledge is based on studies of the more common and far more well-studied eastern subspecies, and there could be some key differences. The assessment also highlighted understanding overwintering locations and migratory stopover sites of western purple martins and potential threats originating during the non-breeding season as one of the key research needs for developing appropriate conservation actions. And scientists are continuing to recognize and emphasize the importance of studying birds year-round to understand their ecology and their conservation needs. A previous study done with light-level geolocators by Fraser et al. In 2012 revealed that western purple martins appear to use an entirely different overwintering area than the more abundant eastern subspecies. So I've circled that in red here on this figure from that paper. But those data come from a relatively small number of individuals, just 6 in the published paper. And furthermore, location data obtained from geolocators are somewhat imprecise. So you're going to get an area with an error of like on the order of tens to hundreds of kilometers rather than a really precise location. And this separate core wintering region in southeastern Brazil is potentially more agricultural than the northern Amazon region of Brazil, where the eastern subspecies tends to overwinter. and western martins overwintering in this area may face totally different threats. It's also unknown whether other western breeding populations outside of the ones from British Columbia, including Oregon's martins, follow this same migratory pattern. But luckily, newer archival GPS tags are now available and small enough to place on purple martins. And these provide unprecedented precision in determining more precise locations. But there's still a key caveat that you have to recapture the bird after a whole year, a whole round-trip migration, to retrieve the tag and your data. So this is what we set out to do with this study. Our objectives are to obtain more precise locations of roosting sites used during migration in winter, and to use this information to identify potential conservation actions and also international partners that might be interested in helping us implement them. So in the summer of 2020, we captured 7 western purple martins breeding in coastal Oregon at night while they roosted in their nest boxes. And we fit them with these lightweight archival GPS tags using a leg loop harness attachment in order to track their year-round movements. And then in summer 2021, last year, we deployed 8 more of these tags. You can program the tags, and we did this to take fixes every few days during what we guessed would be the fall and spring migratory periods, and about once a week through what we guessed would be the winter stationary period. And I put stationary in quotes because we largely didn't know whether they would be actually stationary or not, or if they'd move around quite a bit during the winter as well. Right after tagging the adults, we would monitor nest boxes the next day or up to a week later to check whether they were still present, behaving normally, perching on the nest boxes, flying around, feeding nestlings and all that. And then in spring 2021, our super volunteer and nest box manager, Joe Metzler, began monitoring the boxes again to look for returnees. And I probably don't need to explain how excited we were when he found a returned tagged female. And we were able to capture her, and the tag worked and collected data from July 2020 all the way through mid-March 2021. So let's take a look at these exciting data. Here's the overview of her, it was a female, fall migration route and overwintering locations. You can see after finishing breeding in Oregon, she moved inland before heading south to Baja California, and then she proceeds through western Mexico. We have points taken every 5 days here, including stops in Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Colombia, Venezuela, and then she moves through the Amazon region of Brazil and continues to the southeast Atlantic Brazilian coast. Now, if you're curious, this is how that compares to some of what we know about GPS-tracked eastern purple martins. These figures are from a couple of Bridget Stuchbury et al.'s papers. And tracked eastern martins in these studies stuck to eastern Mexico and the Yucatan during migration. But once they reached Nicaragua and Costa Rica, there actually could be some overlap with our single tracked western purple martin here. And then the eastern martins sort of stop in the Amazon region in northern Brazil, or in some cases western Brazil, whereas our western purple martin continued southeast all the way to the coast. So let's just take a closer look at the extended fall stopover that she did in Baja California Sur. This is just north of Magdalena Bay. She spent an entire month here from mid-August to mid-September, which interestingly aligns with some additional unpublished geolocator data that I believe Bruce Cousins has collected from the British Columbia study population. I don't know if Bruce is here today or not. But I kind of zoomed in on Google Earth, and the habitat here is likely kind of coastal desert and scrub interspersed with some saltwater bays and marshes, maybe even some mangroves, although it's a little bit hard for me to tell from the Google Earth photo. I also want to highlight some of the locations she used in southeastern Brazil from late October through mid-March. So as we mentioned, she arrived in the state of Amazonas in late October and moves through the states of Mato Grosso, Minas Gerais, and then reaches the coast in the state of Bahia and ends up in Espírito Santo, where she does a fair amount of moving around. It's sort of a final winter destination, but there's no, just single winter roost, and a fair bit of within season movement there. And then she stayed until at least March 19th, which is when the batteries died on our GPS tag. So here I'm zooming in a little bit on this area of northern Minas Gerais, where the martin stayed for almost 4 weeks on her way south. So it's basically another extended fall stopover from November 12th to December 8th at least. And we have several night roost locations here shown in the green dots, which seem to be clustered in both a protected area and a nearby national park. And again, it doesn't look like she uses the exact same roost every night, or at least is moving every 5 days, which is the resolution that we're tracking her at. And here, this is the very latest part of the winter where she pretty much stays in the state of Espírito Santo from late December through mid-March. And in this aerial photo, you can see the dark green forest is well broken up by cleared patches and agriculture. And something I thought was interesting in that city of Linhares, some of the roosts we captured are literally right over a highway, which makes me wonder if she's using power or telephone lines or poles as a roosting location. And then in the very last part of winter, she makes it to the beach for Carnival. So this is it's called Praia do Moro in the city of Guarapari. And we have at least 5 roost locations that are right in town or just on the edge between the town and the beach, which again makes me wonder if she is roosting on power lines or something similar. And she was kind of on and off in this area from early January to late February. So what are the conservation implications of what we've found so far? We really want to assess the status of these stopover and overwintering areas. So what is the land cover and use like? What are the current habitat conditions? What proportion of these areas are in existing protected areas or not? And are western purple martins more dependent on urban areas and agricultural areas, as this single bird might suggest? And does this make them more vulnerable to human impacts than the eastern subspecies? But we really need more data to make conclusions and additional sample size beyond data than our single tracked martin. Of course, we were really hoping to add to our sample size and have more exciting results to share with you after this summer. However, we had a pretty good disappointment where we sighted a male during the pre-nesting phase. Birds were still kind of courting and fighting over the nest boxes. We saw him, we can see his antenna by this photo taken by one of our volunteers, but he did not stay and occupy. He seemed to lose his fight for that box, and we've been unable to find him at any nearby sites. This was a pilot project in a lot of ways, and we have experienced some challenges. It seems that nest failure might be higher on the coast. There can be really cold and foggy weather even in summer, and sometimes that results in significant nestling starvation events. And the return rates of the adults might be lower too. Of course, this is not very well studied in the western subspecies. We're not sure if these coastal areas might represent marginal habitat for them or not. And then, of course, they are nesting in relatively small colonies, which kind of limits our available sample size. We aren't getting that many tags out per year. However, by the time you're hearing this, we will hopefully have deployed 8 more tags in July 2022, which means there will be additional resiting and recapture effort in 2023. And another one of our next steps is to really dig more into the GIS and land cover analysis to see what's going on at those stopover locations and wintering grounds. Like, what are the current habitat conditions? Is there any conversion or human impacts that we need to be concerned about? We also are thinking about conservation organizations that work in these areas. I've listed here a few examples of ones in Brazil. Mantiqueira Bird Observatory, I was lucky enough to spend my honeymoon at right pre-pandemic, and they're an interesting potential partner. We're also curious about doing some site visits to these locations. I mean, who wouldn't? But yeah, we want to see what the habitat looks like on the ground and see if lots of purple martins are foraging and roosting there, or whether our female's kind of an exception. Is she there on her own, or is she in a small group or even a large group that might be many western purple martins? So with that, I'd like to thank our funders, the Forest Service, USGS, and the Purple Martin Conservation Association, which helped us purchase these tags and get the work done. And also thanks to Jamie Stevens, Bruce Cousins, Kevin Fraser, and the folks at Low Tech Wireless for their advice and support as well. And with that, I'd be happy to take questions.
All right, Sarah, I don't know if you realize, but you just joined, whether you like it or not, the International Purple Martin Working Group, and we will not take no for an answer. You're a part of this now.
Perfect.
Yeah, so incredible. Just so folks understand, this is the first time that a Western purple martin has been tracked with GPS accuracy. So, the equivalent of when they first went down in the Mariana Trench and they discovered that for the first time. I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but I mean, pretty exciting. You can see all of the biologists gushing in chat about it. So, Sarah, awesome. Let's see. Are you muted or are you unmuted? I think I got you
I
unmuted.
believe I'm unmuted.
Okay,
Can you
there you
hear
are.
me?
There you are. Yep.
Okay.
All right. Questions in chat. Stephanie asked, "Do you know which areas of Mexico the martins pass through?"
To some degree. So we have those fixes programmed for days. So we have a few sites in Mexico. There's probably not an easy way to flip back to that slide, but yeah, I think we have, besides that long duration fall stopover in Baja California, I think we have 2 or 3 other pinpoints in different areas of Mexico that we could also at some point look into further. But yeah, that's kind of the resolution we have every few days. We have a point. So there are a few of those in Mexico, and we don't, again, know exact flight routes, but we do know those selection of roosting sites at least.
But yeah, it seems like the Baja is to Western martins, well, with this little sample size, what the Yucatan is to Eastern purple martins, kind of that, 1 month, 2 month stopover after heading south, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting parallel.
All right. While I'm looking through these, folks always ask, why is it that the birds farthest away from South America are the ones that migrate the farthest south in South America? What are they doing?
It's a good question. It's seen in multiple species. It's called leapfrog migration, I think, where the most northern populations go the furthest south. And I don't know if we know exactly why.
Yeah, it's so counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, sometimes there's speculation that maybe the northern birds are getting to the wintering locations later and closer habitats already full. But that's
looking,
just
right?
one hypothesis.
Yeah. Maria in chat, who has worked with the PMCA and International Purple Martin Working Group, extensively. There's a person in Espirito Santo closely monitoring those roosts for years now.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I'm really happy to be here to plug in more with your international working group and learn who's doing this kind of work in Brazil. I'm curious if that person knows if they can tell what subspecies they are, um, or not, or if they could be a mix of different subspecies. We're also really interested in maybe doing some tagging in the reverse
Hmm.
direction if it's possible. But if there are some known roost sites
Yeah,
like that, maybe that's something we can talk about for future.
we've got so much interest in that, and you're going to hear a lot about it in the afternoon talk. And yeah, it sounds like maybe we need to get some genetic samples at the very least of birds down in Espirito Santo, right? All right.
Yeah, determine that proportion of subspecies.
James Hill says, can you speak more on the battery life of these tags? Yeah, it sounds like your battery died.
Yeah, so the battery life is kind of variable and it depends to a large extent on how you program them. The software that the company provides will give you a little bit of an estimate on battery life, but getting a full year is pretty unlikely. That's about the maximum. And it also depends on where the martin is and how long it takes to get a satellite fix each time. So the program will estimate for you an average, best, and worst case scenario. So if it only takes a few seconds each time to get the satellite fix, your battery will last longer through the year. If it's taking 12, 15 seconds each time to get a satellite fix, your battery will run out sooner, and you really have no way of controlling that. It just depends where the bird is in relation to satellites when you're taking a fix. There's a lot
Yeah,
of variability.
yeah, it's always something that we run up against. Sometimes you get a good life out of one, and sometimes not. And those did not have solar on them, correct?
Correct. Yeah, no solar.
Okay. Um, More from Brazil here. Clarissa says, "Congrats on the results, Sarah. Here at Instituto Butantan, we look forward to working with you. So connections being
Great.
made.
Have to, yeah, get your contact information.
Oh yeah, yeah." Terry asks, "How can we follow your work on the migration of Western purple martins?"
Well, how can you follow it? We are starting to do some posts and things. We haven't really shared this much yet since we hadn't given any kind of, I don't know, professional talks or publications, but Klamath Bird Observatory has a blog that you can follow if you like. You'll get updates on this and also all our other projects, but yeah, I think right now that'd be the best way.
Yeah, follow Klamath. Obviously, it'll end up in the PMCA's magazine and shared
Yes.
via us. Usually, you have to wait to kind of spread widely in lay magazines and that until you've officially published the scientific paper. Usually, they require you to maintain exclusivity. So, folks, this is your little sneak peek, but it'll be coming. Dan asked, the use of Southeast Brazil consistent with the one previous geolocator datum, right?
Yeah, correct. And that map I showed from Fraser et al., I actually think it might be 5 birds from British Columbia, but it looks like British Columbia and Oregon might have some overlap in wintering location.
Yeah, it seems like it. Seems like it. Um, okay, well, thank you so much for sharing this exciting data. You guys are getting the first look at it. I hope you understand how special this is that Sarah's sharing this with us. So thank you so much, Sarah. We're so excited with the research that you're doing there.
Yeah, great. And yeah, thanks for inviting me and helping me make some connections with other researchers.
Absolutely, that's why we're doing this.